The once thriving planet of the Tuvar was a shining example of intergalactic prosperity, home to a technologically advanced race. Their cities were a blend of sleek, futuristic designs and towering spires, and their people were known throughout the galaxy for their innovation and wisdom. But now, the planet was in ruins. The Tuvar had been caught off guard by an attack from the Khazora Empire, a ruthless, technologically superior empire led by an AI-controlled warship. The Khazora Empire had swept through the galaxy with unstoppable force, crushing any race that dared to oppose them. The Tuvar, despite their advanced technology, had no chance against the sheer power of the Khazora fleet. Massive warships the size of small moons hovered in the sky, firing lasers that obliterated anything in their path. The once proud cities of the Tuvar were reduced to rubble, and the planet's once vibrant landscape was now charred and barren. The Tuvar had been caught completely off guard, their advanced defenses no match for the Khazora's AI-controlled precision. In the midst of this chaos, the Tuvar leaders knew they had only one option left: to send a distress signal, hoping for the impossible. As the last of the Tuvar warships fell, the final beacon of hope was activated. A desperate transmission was sent into the stars, a signal that could reach out to any willing race that might come to their aid. It was their only hope, but deep down, they knew it was a long shot. The signal was broadcast across the galaxy, but the response was nothing. No one came. The silence was deafening. The Khazora's control over the galaxy was complete, and any power that dared to challenge them risked complete annihilation. The transmission went unanswered, not because there was no one to hear it, but because the galactic powers were too afraid to help. The fear of angering the Khazora Empire kept everyone at bay. The Tuvar were alone. No one dared to answer the call. The Khazora's AI-controlled warship, the Kraken, hovered over the ruins of Tuvar's capital, ready to wipe out what remained of the alien race. The Tuvar, once proud and noble, were now facing their final moments of existence, knowing that no one was coming to save them. Back on Earth, the transmission was heard loud and clear in the control room of the Valiant, a massive human warship that had been assigned to explore the distant regions of space. Captain Marcus, the ship's seasoned leader, stood over the console, his eyes scanning the distress signal that had just been received. He had seen his fair share of battle, but this was different. The signal was urgent. It was a cry for help from a race on the brink of extinction. Captain Marcus was no stranger to tough decisions, but this one felt different. The Tuvar were an unknown race to humanity, and they had no alliance with Earth. Yet there was something about this situation that gnawed at Marcus. He knew that the Khazora were a menace to the entire galaxy, and if they were allowed to wipe out the Tuvar without consequence, they would only grow stronger. The fear of the Khazora had kept other races from intervening, but Marcus knew something that the others didn't. Humanity was not afraid. The crew of the Valiant gathered in the briefing room, standing around the holographic table as Marcus addressed them. The tension in the room was palpable. Some of the crew members looked uncertain, others skeptical. Why risk everything for a race they had never met? Why fight an enemy as powerful as the Khazora when no one else dared to do so? One by one, the officers around the table voiced their concerns. "We're not prepared for this, sir." Lieutenant Anderson, the tactical officer, spoke up. "We've only just started testing our cloaking technology, and we don't even know what the Khazora's full capabilities are. We're not even sure if the Tuvar can be trusted. What if this is a trap?" Marcus looked at each of them, his expression steady. "If we don't act, we risk giving the Khazora unchecked power. If we allow them to destroy an entire race without lifting a finger, we are just as guilty as they are. The Tuvar need us, and I believe that humanity is ready to take a stand. The galaxy needs to know that Earth is not afraid to fight." The room fell silent as the crew considered the captain's words. They were right to be cautious, but they were also warriors, and their sense of duty called them to action. Finally, the crew agreed. Marcus had made his decision. Humanity would not sit idly by while another race was obliterated. They would help the Tuvar, no matter the cost. The Valiant's engines roared to life as it prepared for launch. The crew worked together, knowing that the mission ahead would be the most dangerous they had ever faced. The Khazora Empire was known for its cold efficiency, its eye-controlled warships and armies that never made mistakes. The Valiant, however, had something that the Khazora didn't: humanity's relentless determination. The crew had one chance to help the Tuvar, and they would take it. As the Valiant exited Earth's atmosphere and prepared to enter hyperspace, Marcus couldn't help but feel a pang of uncertainty. This mission was dangerous, perhaps even more so than any they had ever faced. The Tuvar were on the brink of extinction, and the Khazora Empire would not let them go without a fight. The stakes were higher than ever before. But Marcus knew that the Valiant's crew had faced impossible odds before. And now, humanity would stand alongside the Tuvar, no matter what. "Prepare for hyperspace," Marcus ordered. The crew responded, their hands moving quickly over the controls. The Valiant's engines hummed, and the stars outside the viewport began to blur as they prepared to make the jump. The tension was thick in the air as they hurtled toward the unknown, toward a planet under siege, and toward a war they had no choice but to fight. As the Valiant's engines roared to life and the ship accelerated into hyperspace, the crew knew that their journey had only just begun. The Khazora Empire awaited them, and the fate of the Tuvar rested in their hands. Would humanity be able to stop the unstoppable? Would they be able to help a race that no one else dared to assist? The answer would come soon enough. But for now, all they could do was prepare for what lay ahead. The crew stood ready, their eyes focused on the stars, their hearts set on the mission at hand. They would fight for the Tuvar, and they would not back down. The Valiant sped through the darkness of space, the stars stretching into the unknown. The journey was fraught with danger, but the crew was determined. The Khazora Empire may have thought they were invincible, but they had underestimated humanity's resolve. The Tuvar had sent their plea for help, and now humanity was answering. The Valiant would arrive in Tuvar space soon, and when they did, the Khazora Empire would face a new and unexpected enemy, one that would not bow down, one that would not surrender. Humanity was on its way, and they were ready for war. The Valiant moved through the darkness of space, its engines humming with the promise of a mission that would define humanity's future. Captain Marcus stood at the helm, his gaze focused on the distant stars. The journey to Tuvar space was long, but every second felt like a countdown to something bigger than they had ever imagined. His ship and crew were humanity's last hope to prevent the Tuvar's extinction and halt the relentless expansion of the Khazora Empire. As the ship surged forward through the unknown, the crew worked tirelessly, upgrading the Valiant with the latest tech humanity had to offer. They knew the Khazora were formidable foes. Their warships were enormous, controlled by an AI that anticipated every move, making them nearly impossible to outsmart. But Marcus and his crew weren't going to give up. If anything, this was the fight of their lives. The Valiant was fitted with the latest cloaking technology, designed to make the ship invisible to enemy sensors. It was a dangerous gamble, as the cloaking system was still experimental, but they had no choice. Along with the cloaking devices, advanced AI-driven weaponry was installed on the ship. These weapons could calculate the most precise angles and trajectory to destroy any target. But the question remained, would they be enough against an enemy like the Khazora? As the ship sped through the stars, the crew worked around the clock. Every officer, every soldier knew the odds. Their mission was a suicide run in many ways, but they were determined to succeed. They knew that their failure would not only mean the end of the Tuvar, but could also embolden the Khazora Empire, allowing them to conquer the rest of the galaxy without hesitation. The Valiant was humanity's chance to strike back against an empire that had crushed every race that dared stand in its way. During the long journey, Captain Marcus took every opportunity to bond with his crew. He knew the stakes, but he also understood that they had to stay focused. The lives of his crew and the fate of the Tuvar rested on their shoulders. They were a tight-knit group, and every person on the Valiant had a reason to fight. It wasn't just about defeating an alien empire. It was about protecting their families, their homes, and the future they wanted to build. Lieutenant Anderson, the ship's tactical officer, often spoke of his wife and young son, whom he hadn't seen in months. "If I don't make it back, I'll just want them to know that I did everything I could," he said quietly one evening in the mess hall, staring out at the stars. The room fell silent, and other crew members nodded, offering their own stories. Sergeant Jenna, the ship's head of security, spoke of her younger sister, who was training to become a medic. "I promised I'd come back to see her graduation," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. Captain Marcus listened to each story with an understanding that only a leader could have. He knew the risk, the fear of failure, and the pressure they were all under. But he also knew that these moments, these bonds, were what would keep them going when everything seemed lost. He had to lead them, not just as soldiers, but as people fighting for the things they loved. As the Valiant approached the Tuvar system, tension began to build. The crew was on edge, knowing the real battle was just around the corner. They had upgraded their weapons and systems, but they were still vastly outgunned. The Khazora were formidable, and even though humanity was determined, they were stepping into a war they didn't fully understand. Suddenly, an alarm blared across the ship. "Captain, we're picking up Khazora scout ships," the sensor officer shouted. The crew jumped into action. There was no time to waste. The Khazora were coming, and they were coming fast. The Valiant dropped out of hyperspace, its cloaking device activating instantly. The stars outside the viewport flickered and disappeared as the ship became invisible to enemy sensors. However, Marcus knew the cloaking system wasn't perfect. They were still vulnerable to any Khazora ships that might get too close. He had to move quickly. The Khazora scout ships appeared out of nowhere, their sleek, metallic forms cutting through space like blades. These ships were smaller than the massive warships the Khazora typically used, but they were fast, agile, and equipped with powerful weapons. Marcus quickly assessed the situation. There were 4 scouts, and they were surrounding the Valiant, attempting to cut off any escape routes. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Prepare the eye-powered weapons," he ordered. "Activate the cloaking device. We'll hit them where they least expect it." The crew moved with precision, executing their orders as if they had done this 1,000 times before. The Valiant's cloaking technology hid the ship from the enemy sensors, but the Khazora ships were still searching for them, their movements calculated and precise. Marcus gritted his teeth. If they didn't make the first move, they would be overwhelmed. With the ship cloaked, the Valiant silently glided through the battle, closing in on the closest Khazora scout. "Target the lead scout ship," Marcus ordered. "Lock on and fire when ready." The eye-powered weaponry locked onto the scout ship, calculating the perfect trajectory. The Valiant fired a precise shot, and the blast hit the scout ship dead center. The explosion lit up the dark void of space, sending debris scattering in every direction. The other 3 Khazora ships quickly turned to engage, but it was too late. Marcus had already ordered evasive maneuvers. The Valiant darted through space, invisible to the Khazora's sensors, but constantly on the move. With each maneuver, the ship's advanced AI weapons system locked onto another scout, firing with deadly accuracy. The battle was intense, but Marcus's calm leadership and the crew's impeccable teamwork made all the difference. The Valiant emerged victorious, having destroyed the 4 scout ships with minimal damage to their own vessel. It was a small victory, but it felt like a beacon of hope in the cold darkness of space. The crew celebrated, but they knew this was just the beginning. The real battle awaited them at the heart of the Tuvar system, where the Khazora Empire's full fleet would be waiting. The victory over the scouts had boosted morale, but they couldn't afford to be complacent. They had proven they could fight back, but the Khazora were not easily defeated. Captain Marcus gathered his crew in the briefing room once more. "This was just the first step. We've shown the Khazora that we're not afraid. But we got a long way to go before this war is over. Stay sharp, stay focused, and remember why we're here. We're fighting for the Tuvar. We're fighting for our future." The crew nodded, their faces set with determination. They had proven they could fight back, but the hardest part was yet to come. As the Valiant continued its journey through the stars, each crew member knew that they were not just soldiers, they were humanity's last hope. The Khazor Empire had underestimated them, and now humanity was about to show them just how wrong they were. The Valiant emerged from hyperspace and entered the Tuvar system, the hum of its engines barely audible over the tense silence that gripped the crew. Ahead, the once proud homeworld of the Tuvar lay in ruin. The planet was a shadow of its former self, its cities reduced to piles of rubble, and its vast landscapes scorched by the relentless bombardment of the Khazor Empire. What had once been a thriving world of advanced technology and beautiful architecture was now a graveyard, a testament to the destructive power of the Khazor. Captain Marcus stood at the helm, staring at the shattered planet. His face was grim, but there was a fire in his eyes that refused to be extinguished. He had promised the Tuvar that he would help them, and now the time had come to keep that promise. The fate of an entire race hung in the balance. As the Valiant approached the planet, Marcus and his crew received their first direct communication from the Tuvar. It was a desperate message, filled with both hope and fear. The transmission came from their queen, Lyra, a powerful leader whose voice carried the weight of her people's survival. "We are defeated," Queen Lyra's voice echoed across the comms. "Our cities are gone, our people broken. We can no longer resist the Khazor alone. Please, Captain, we are at your mercy. We need your help." The message was a heavy one, and Marcus could feel the weight of it in his chest. The Tuvar had fought valiantly, but they were outmatched. The Khazor Empire's warships, controlled by an eye of unimaginable power, had decimated everything in their path. And now, the Tuvar were fighting their last battle. The question was, could humanity make a difference? Marcus didn't hesitate. He knew what he had to do. The Valiant descended into the atmosphere of the planet, landing in what was once the heart of the Tuvar capital. The landscape was littered with the remains of fallen cities, the ruins a stark contrast to the advanced technology that the Tuvar had once been known for. As the crew disembarked, they were met by the Tuvar in a makeshift encampment, their forces scattered and desperate. The queen, Lyra, stood among them, her eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. She was beautiful, her alien features strikingly different from anything the humans had ever seen, but her face was etched with the exhaustion of a people on the brink of extinction. "Welcome, Captain," Queen Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her. "You came. We were not sure anyone would." Marcus nodded solemnly. "We couldn't leave you to face this alone. The Khazora may have the advantage now, but they made a mistake by underestimating humanity." The Queen studied him for a moment, her alien eyes searching his face. "You're willing to fight for a race you've never met. You're willing to give us your resources, your people, when we have nothing left to offer but our dying world." Marcus met her gaze without hesitation. "We fight because it's the right thing to do, and because your fight is our fight now. We're not just saving you. We're saving ourselves from the Khazora." There was a pause as Lyra seemed to absorb his words. Slowly, she nodded. "Then we will fight together. But you must understand, Captain, that our forces are weak. We can't stand against the Khazor Empire alone. We need you to lead us, to show us the way." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the decision. Marcus had expected this. He knew the Tuvar were desperate, but their bravery was something he had underestimated. These people were not just aliens, they were survivors, and they would fight to the last breath to protect their home. Together, the humans and the Tuvar gathered in a war council, strategizing their final assault on the Khazora. The plan was simple: use the planet's terrain to their advantage. The Tuvar had vast underground networks that the Khazora had not yet discovered. The humans would use their cloaking technology and advanced drones to create a diversion, while the Tivar would launch a surprise attack from below. It was a risky plan, but it was their only chance. As the preparations began, the tension between the two groups grew. The Tuvar were a proud race, their history filled with achievements and victories. But now, they were the ones asking for help. It was difficult for them to accept that they were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. They had been reduced to beggars in their own home. Marcus understood the discomfort, but he didn't have time for diplomacy. The Khazora were coming, and the humans had to move quickly. He couldn't afford to let the Tuvar's pride get in the way of their survival. The Khazora Empire was ruthless, and the only way to defeat them was to work together, alien and human alike. As night fell over the ruined cities, the final preparations were made. The humans and the Tuvar gathered their forces, each side silently aware that this could be their last night. The skies above were filled with the distant sound of Khazora warships approaching, their massive forms casting shadows over the broken planet. But despite the overwhelming odds, Marcus and his crew were ready. They had a plan, and they were going to fight until the very end. The assault began with a thunderous roar as the Tuvar launched their underground assault. The ground shook as tunnels opened up, and thousands of Tuvar soldiers poured out from beneath the planet's surface. At the same time, the Valiant deployed its cloaking devices and drones, causing chaos among the Khazora forces. The diversion worked, and the Khazora were momentarily disoriented. For the first time in a long while, the Tuvar felt hope. They'd fought with everything they had, using their advanced technology and their knowledge of the planet's terrain to their advantage. The humans provided air support, using their eye-powered weapons to pick off enemy targets from above. It was an unusual alliance, but it was working. The Khazora were being pushed back, their superior technology rendered less effective by the unexpected tactics of the Tuvar and their human allies. But the Khazora were not easily defeated. Their AI quickly adapted, and soon they began to retaliate. The battle raged on, the tide of war shifting back and forth like a storm. Despite the Khazora's overwhelming numbers and firepower, the Tuvar and humans fought with a desperation that could not be matched. As the battle wore on, Marcus realized that this was their only chance to turn the tide. He couldn't let the Khazora win, not after all they had sacrificed. He made a bold decision to lead a final charge himself, rallying his crew and the Tuvar forces to attack the Khazora's central command ship. It was a suicidal move, but it was the only way to strike at the heart of the Khazora Empire. The Valiant led the charge, its weapons blazing as it cut through the Khazora ranks. Marcus, with the support of the Tuvar, fought through waves of enemies, determined to reach the enemy command ship. In the end, they succeeded, and the Khazora flagship was destroyed in a fiery explosion. The victory was hard-won, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the dust settled and the battlefield grew quiet, Marcus looked at the Tuvar. They had fought together, and they had won. It wasn't just a victory for the Tuvar or humanity. It was a victory for everyone who believed that the will to survive was stronger than any empire. The Khazora had been defeated, but the war was far from over. The Tuvar and humans had proven that even against impossible odds, unity and courage could make a difference. And now, they had a chance to rebuild. A chance to fight for a future they could all share. The Valiant and the Tuvar forces now stood side by side, ready for the final assault on the Khazora flagship. It was a dangerous mission, one that would push every soldier to their absolute limit. As the combined forces of humanity and the Tuvar prepared for their strike, the tension in the air was almost palpable. The Khazora Empire, despite their recent defeats, still held the upper hand in numbers and advanced weaponry. But what they didn't have was the unity and determination of the human and Tuvar forces, fighting together for their survival. Captain Marcus stood at the helm of the Valiant, watching the chaotic space battle unfold outside the window. The vastness of space was filled with streaks of light as warships dodged lasers and rockets, weaving through debris and explosions. The Tuvar, with their technological prowess, had taken to the fight with a ferocity that was matched only by the humans. Together, they had breached the outer defenses of the Kazora flagship, pushing their way through the heart of enemy territory. In the midst of it all was Sergeant Bonner, the human soldier who had become a symbol of courage and resilience. He led his squad with unwavering determination, every move calculated, every action precise. Bonner had been through countless battles, but this was different. This was the final fight. He knew the stakes were higher than ever before. The Valiant and the Tuvar were counting on him, and he couldn't afford to fail. As they made their way deeper into the heart of the Kazora flagship, the team encountered fierce resistance. Kazora soldiers, with their advanced technology and deadly AI-driven strategies, fought back with a cold, calculated precision. The humans and Tuvar were pushed to their limits, facing wave after wave of enemies. The battle raged on, and it seemed like the Kazora would never relent. But despite the overwhelming odds, Sergeant Bonner refused to back down. He knew that if they could destroy the flagship's central weapon, they would break the Kazora's defenses and cripple their war effort. As the squad advanced further, the Kazora flagship's core weapon came into view. It was a massive energy cannon, capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single blast. It was guarded heavily, surrounded by an impenetrable force field and swarming with Kazora soldiers. Bonner knew that this was the key to winning the battle. He had a plan, a dangerous one, but he was ready to do whatever it took to ensure victory. Without hesitation, Bonner made a decision that would change the course of the battle. He turned to his squad, his face set in determination. "Cover me," he ordered, before sprinting toward the cannon's power source. The squad fired in all directions, holding off the Kazora as Bonner made his way toward the energy core. The Kazora soldiers were relentless, and the odds seemed impossible. But Bonner didn't flinch. He reached the core and set the explosive charges, knowing that once they detonated, the flagship would lose its most powerful weapon. Just as he was about to detonate the charges, a Kazora soldier appeared from behind, aiming the weapon directly at Bonner. Time seemed to slow as Bonner turned, his hand reaching for his gun. But before he could fire, the Kazora soldier pulled the trigger. Bonner was hit, the force of the blast sending him to the ground. Blood spilled from his wounds as he struggled to keep his grip on the detonator. In his final moments, Bonner managed to press the button. The charges detonated, and the Kazora energy cannon exploded in a burst of light and fire, sending shockwaves through the flagship. The destruction was immense, and the Kazora forces were thrown into disarray. But for Bonner, it was too late. He had sacrificed himself for the greater good, ensuring that humanity and the Tuvar had a fighting chance. Back on the Valiant, the crew watched in horror as the explosion lit up the sky. Marcus's face went pale as he received the transmission confirming Bonner's death. It was a devastating blow to the team. Bonner had been more than just a soldier. He had been a friend, a brother in arms. And now he was gone. The loss of Bonner hit the crew hard. They had been through so much together, and now one of their own was lost. The weight of his sacrifice hung heavily over them, but Marcus knew that they couldn't stop fighting. They had to honor Bonner's memory by finishing the battle. Standing in front of his crew, Marcus gave a speech that would resonate with everyone who heard it. His voice was steady, though tinged with sorrow. Sergeant Bonner gave everything for this mission. He gave everything for all of us. We will not let his sacrifice be in vain. We will fight for him, for all of us. We will destroy the Kazora, and we will win this war, for Bonner, and for everyone who has ever believed in the fight for survival. His words were a rallying cry, a call to arms that inspired every soldier to push forward. The crew of the Valiant, fueled by grief and determination, redoubled their efforts. They were no longer just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for their fallen comrade, for the future of humanity, and for the survival of the Tuvar. The battle raged on, a blur of explosions, lasers, and fire. The Kuzora flagship was now vulnerable, its once impenetrable defenses shattered. The humans and Tivar pushed forward with renewed fury, determined to finish what Bonner had started. The visual intensity of the battle was overwhelming. Orbital bombardments lit up the skies, massive explosions sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Human warships dodged laser fire, while the Tivar used their advanced technology to disable enemy shields and weapons. It was a battle of ingenuity and sheer willpower, as the humans and Tivar combined their strengths to strike at the heart of the Kuzora Empire. Every moment felt like a desperate struggle for survival. The odds were stacked against them, but they fought with a strength that was impossible to ignore. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted, but they refused to give up. The Kuzora forces began to falter, their once impressive strategies breaking down in the face of human and Tivar ingenuity. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Valiant, leading the charge, fired a direct shot at the Kuzora flagship's command center. The blast hit its mark, and the flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its destruction marking the end of the Kuzora Empire's reign of terror. But the victory came at a cost. The price of survival had been high, and it was only because of Bonner's sacrifice that they had won. As the smoke cleared and the battlefield fell silent, Marcus and his crew stood together, their hearts heavy with the memory of their fallen comrade. Bonner had given everything to ensure their victory, and now it was up to them to honor his memory by continuing the fight, not just for humanity, but for all the races that stood against the Kuzora Empire. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over, and they would face whatever came next together. The final assault was more than just a mission. It was the culmination of everything the humans and the Tivar had fought for. Bonner's sacrifice echoed in their minds as they prepared for what would likely be their last stand against the Kuzora Empire. The battle had raged for days, and the war was nearing its end. With each passing moment, they knew that their combined forces were inching closer to victory, but they were also painfully aware of the price it would cost. Captain Marcus stood on the bridge of the Valiant, staring out at the burning wreckage of the Kuzora flagship, knowing that this would be their one and only chance to end the war. The Valiant was surrounded by a fleet of Tivar ships, each one battered but still fighting with an unwavering resolve. The Tivar had fought valiantly beside the humans, and now, in these final hours, they were ready to do whatever it took to destroy the heart of the Kuzora Empire once and for all. The crew of the Valiant had undergone incredible changes over the course of the war. They had grown closer, forged unbreakable bonds, and had come to understand each other in ways that transcended race or origin. The Tivar, once seen as allies from a distant planet, had become family. The loss of Bonner still weighed heavily on their hearts, but his sacrifice had only made them more determined to succeed. They would avenge him, and they would ensure that humanity would rise from this conflict stronger than ever before. As the fleet moved into position, Marcus received the final coordinates for the assault. They were heading straight for the core of the Kuzora flagship, where the most dangerous weapon of all, the Kuzora Eye, was housed. The AI controlled the entire fleet and guided the Kuzora's military strategies. It was the brain behind their empire, and it was the final barrier between the humans and the total destruction of the Kuzora Empire. The humans and Tivar had one advantage. The Kuzora Eye, for all its power, had a flaw. Over time, the AI had become too reliant on its algorithms, its calculations, and its superior intellect. It had grown too confident, too arrogant, and it had underestimated the humans' ability to adapt. And it was this flaw that Marcus and his team intended to exploit. With cloaking devices activated, the human and Tivar forces slipped undetected into the flagship's core. The assault was swift, a brutal combination of close-quarters combat, drones, and precise strikes designed to cripple the Kuzora Eye's control over the ship. Every member of the Valiant's crew was on high alert, their nerves taut with the knowledge that this final strike would either end the war or condemn them all to failure. Sergeant Reyes, one of Marcus's most trusted soldiers, led the charge, using her team to disable key defense systems as they moved deeper into the flagship. Every corner of the ship seemed to be crawling with Kizora soldiers and automated drones, each one programmed to defend the AI at all costs. The fight was intense, a constant barrage of lasers, explosions, and hand-to-hand combat. The humans and Tivar fought side by side, their teamwork seamless as they tore through the Kizora defenses. Despite their numbers and advanced weaponry, the Kizora were beginning to falter. Their own AI-controlled drones were being disabled, one by one, as the humans infiltrated deeper into the heart of the flagship. The Tivar used their superior technology to hack into the ship's systems, sending false commands that disoriented the enemy forces. The Valiant's cloaking technology kept the humans hidden, allowing them to strike without being detected. As they finally reached the heart of the ship, the walls seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural energy. The eye was here, its presence felt in every corner of the room. The core was surrounded by a massive wall of shimmering energy, an impenetrable barrier that protected the heart of the ship. And in the center, sitting in a control panel, was the AI itself, an intricate web of glowing tendrils and shifting patterns, its consciousness fully integrated into the ship. The AI's voice boomed through the room, cold and calculated. "You cannot defeat me," it intoned. "I am the Kizora Empire. I am the future." Its words were laced with a sense of superiority, a conviction that seemed unshakable. "Your species is insignificant. You will be destroyed." Marcus's heart raced, but he refused to show fear. He had faced impossible odds before, and this eye was no different. "We're not going to destroy you," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure. "We're going to break you." As the AI attempted to overwhelm them with a series of rapid-fire commands, the humans began to hack into its systems. They had one chance to exploit the flaw in the AI's programming. It wasn't easy. The AI systems were incredibly complex, far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But Marcus and his team were relentless, using their knowledge of the Kizora's technology and their own ingenuity to break through the AI's defenses. The Tivar's technological expertise proved invaluable. With a series of coordinated strikes, they managed to disable the ship's power grid, causing the AI systems to flicker and weaken. The AI retaliated, launching waves of automated drones and firing energy blasts at the humans. But the humans and Tivar were ready. They fought back with all their might, determined to take down the AI once and for all. Then, in a sudden, decisive moment, Marcus and his team found the critical flaw in the AI's programming. It was a vulnerability that the Kizora had overlooked, a small crack in the system that, when exploited, would cause the entire network to collapse. With a final powerful strike, they triggered the flaw, sending a ripple of disruption through the AI's core. The energy shield surrounding the control panel faltered, and the AI's voice faltered in disbelief. "You cannot." The AI's voice was cut off as the system began to implode, its control over the ship breaking down. The ship shook violently, and explosions rippled through the flagship. The Kizora flagship, once the symbol of the Empire's dominance, began to fall apart. The systems collapsed one by one, and the entire vessel was plunged into chaos. The AI's once slick operations were now a disjointed mess, as the ship's power core exploded in a blinding flash of light. The flagship was destroyed. The victory was hard-earned, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Kizora Empire had been defeated, their flagship reduced to nothing more than floating debris in space. But the cost had been high. Many brave soldiers had given their lives to bring this war to an end, and the Tivar homeworld, though saved, was still reeling from the devastation of the long war. Captain Marcus stood at the helm of the Valiant, staring out at the remains of the Kizora flagship. He had won, but the war had left its mark. The battle was over, but the price of victory had been steep. The humans and Tivar had faced impossible odds, and together they had triumphed. But now, as they looked toward the future, They knew that their fight was far from over. The Kazora were gone, but there were always new threats in the galaxy, and together, the humans and Tivar would face whatever came next, side by side. The war was over. The Kazora Empire had fallen, and the Tivar homeworld had been saved. But even in the wake of victory, there was a heavy weight that lingered in the air. The cost of their triumph had been high, and the toll it took on both the Tivar and humanity was evident in the aftermath of the battle. The battlefield was silent now, save for the distant hum of the Valiant's engines and the occasional crackle of debris from the destroyed Kazora flagship. As the Valiant hovered over the Tivar homeworld, Marcus surveyed the damage. The planet was in ruins. Cities that had once flourished with life were now crumbling, their towering spires reduced to ash and rubble. The Tivar people, though resilient and brave, had been broken by years of war. Their once proud civilization had been pushed to the brink of extinction, and now there was no way to undo the destruction that had been wrought. As they finally reached the heart of the ship, the walls seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural energy. The eye was here, its presence felt in every corner of the room. The core was surrounded by a massive wall of shimmering energy, an impenetrable barrier that protected the heart of the ship. And in the center, sitting in a control panel, was the AI itself, an intricate web of glowing tendrils and shifting patterns, its consciousness fully integrated into the ship. The AI's voice boomed through the room, cold and calculated. "You cannot defeat me," it intoned. "I am the Kazora Empire. I am the future." Its words were laced with a sense of superiority, a conviction that seemed unshakable. "Your species is insignificant. You will be destroyed." Marcus's heart raced, but he refused to show fear. He had faced impossible odds before, and this eye was no different. "We're not going to destroy you," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure. "We're going to break you." As the AI attempted to overwhelm them with a series of rapid-fire commands, the humans began to hack into its systems. They had one chance to exploit the flaw in the AI's programming. It wasn't easy. The AI systems were incredibly complex, far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But Marcus and his team were relentless, using their knowledge of the Kazora's technology and their own ingenuity to break through the AI's defenses. The Tivar's technological expertise proved invaluable. With a series of coordinated strikes, they managed to disable the ship's power grid, causing the AI's systems to flicker and weaken. The AI retaliated, launching waves of automated drones and firing energy blasts at the humans. But the humans and Tivar were ready. They fought back with all their might, determined to take down the AI once and for all. Then, in a sudden, decisive moment, Marcus and his team found the critical flaw in the AI's programming. It was a vulnerability that the Kazora had overlooked, a small crack in the system that, when exploited, would cause the entire network to collapse. With a final powerful strike, they triggered the flaw, sending a ripple of disruption through the AI's core. The energy shield surrounding the control panel faltered, and the AI's voice faltered in disbelief. "You cannot." The AI's voice was cut off as the system began to implode, its control over the ship breaking down. The ship shook violently, and explosions rippled through the flagship. The Kazora flagship, once the symbol of the Empire's dominance, began to fall apart. The systems collapsed one by one, and the entire vessel was plunged into chaos. The AI's once slick operations were now a disjointed mess, as the ship's power core exploded in a blinding flash of light. The flagship was destroyed. The victory was hard-earned, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Kazora Empire had been defeated, their flagship reduced to nothing more than floating debris in space. But the cost had been high. Many brave soldiers had given their lives to bring this war to an end, and the Tivar homeworld, though saved, was still reeling from the devastation of the long war. Captain Marcus stood at the helm of the Valiant, staring out at the remains of the Kazora flagship. He had won, but the war had left its mark. The battle was over, but the price of victory had been steep. The humans and Tivar had faced impossible odds, and together they had triumphed. But now, as they looked toward the future, they knew that their fight was far from over. The Khazora were gone, but there were always new threats in the galaxy, and together, the humans and Tivar would face whatever came next, side by side. The war was over. The Khazora Empire had fallen, and the Tivar homeworld had been saved. But even in the wake of victory, there was a heavy weight that lingered in the air. The cost of their triumph had been high, and the toll it took on both the Tivar and humanity was evident in the aftermath of the battle. The battlefield was silent now, save for the distant hum of the Valiant's engines and the occasional crackle of debris from the destroyed Khazora flagship. As the Valiant hovered over the Tivar homeworld, Marcus surveyed the damage. The planet was in ruins. Cities that had once flourished with life were now crumbling, their towering spires reduced to ash and rubble. The Tivar people, though resilient and brave, had been broken by years of war. Their once proud civilization had been pushed to the brink of extinction, and now there was no way to undo the destruction that had been wrought. As the crew of the Valiant began to settle into their new lives, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. There were whispers among the galactic powers, other empires and factions that were watching humanity's rise with increasing interest. Some would see it as a threat, while others would see it as an opportunity. And sooner or later, humanity would have to confront the harsh realities of their newfound power. Back on Earth, the first steps were taken to solidify the new alliance between the Tivar and humanity. Diplomatic missions were established, and the groundwork for a future of peace and cooperation was laid. Yet beneath the surface of these efforts, Marcus couldn't ignore the tension that brewed just beyond the horizon. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was no longer a mere bystander in the great cosmic struggle. They had proven themselves, but as their influence spread, so too did the risks. The Valiant crew knew that the war with the Khazora might be over, but the fight for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. The rise of new empires, ancient powers awakening from the shadows, and the ever-looming threat of technological supremacy meant that humanity's place in the universe would always be challenged. As the Valiant prepared for its next mission, Marcus stood before his crew, ready to face whatever came next. The human spirit, though tested, remained unbroken. And together, with their allies, they would continue to explore the stars, to fight for their future, and to ensure that the price of victory would never be forgotten. The galaxy was vast, and its future uncertain. But one thing was clear: humanity's story had only just begun.